Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Dick, Sharon, and Nia here to talk to you about the latest play we saw. This last weekend, we saw The Mountaintop at the Geffen Playhouse. Written by Katori Hall and directed by Patricia McGregor, The Mountaintop is a look at the night before Martin Luther King Jr.'s murder on April 4th, 1968. After giving what will be his final speech, I have been to the mountaintop, to striking sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. King returns to his hotel room where he's eventually joined by a hotel maid. The two learn about each other and their callings in life across the 90-minute play that culminates at the moment of Dr. King's murder. Dad, Sharon, any thoughts
Well,
to get us started?
so, I was 10 years old when Martin Luther King was assassinated. So I didn't really live through the whole King experience. And truth be told, this is the honest to goodness truth, I didn't know who Martin Luther King was until the day he was assassinated. And on the day he was assassinated, I do remember my teacher saying that Martin Luther King had been assassinated, and she had tears in her eyes. And then it was all on television, and I was asking my parents, and who is Martin Luther King Jr.? So I didn't come from the kind of home where Black conscious thought, Black consciousness, civil rights was really openly discussed. And I'm the oldest of the kids in the family, so I was 10, so I was kind of young. But of course, my later years, I just delved into anything that I could learn about Martin Luther King because, truth be told, I was a little bit embarrassed about not knowing who he was. And Martin Luther King, he became the icon of the civil rights era, partly because he was assassinated, but partly because he was just an amazing orator, an amazing speechwriter. He had amazing insight into the plight of being human, being oppressed, what it would take for us to come out of that. And frankly, I was not all that enthused about the play. I expected the discussion between Martin Luther King Jr. and the woman who came to deliver some coffee and shared cigarettes with him. I expected it to go into greater depth about what Martin Luther King's life was about. And in that respect, it was disappointing. There were some things that were strong about the play, but overall, I would have wanted more.
So April 3rd, 1968, I'm older than her, as you know, and so I did live those times. Unfortunately, at that particular time, I was a patient in Fitzsimmons Army Hospital in Denver. There was no television news around there. There were no newspapers. And the whole time I was in the Army, I was sort of divorced from the news of the world, I think on purpose, but mostly because we had other things to do, and a lot of my fellow soldiers weren't that much into it. So I didn't kind of really get traction with Martin Luther King's assassination until later. I will say that one thing that really impressed me about the play, we don't like to give away too much about what these plays are about, but everybody knows this play takes place in the Lorraine Motel. Earlier that night, Martin Luther King delivered a speech. I've been to the Mountaintop speech, that every time, every biography of Martin Luther King, they refer to the speech, they quote the speech. In fact, I'm going to read a few sentences from it. So that he comes to this hotel exhausted from giving this speech to several thousand Memphis sanitation workers. And as we know, the following morning, outside the very motel room where the play is set, he's assassinated. I thought that was a very clever way. That is a time of real fission. I mean, his speech was emphasized his divorce from support of the Vietnam War, which some people have said it led to his assassination. And then obviously his assassination was a crushing blow to the man's life, but also to the movement, because he was a tremendously gifted orator. The thing I wanted to read, so where the title comes from is, he's allowed me to go to the mountaintop, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the Lord.
Of the coming of the Lord.
The coming of the Lord. And it is often thought that he had the legitimate presage that his life might not be long, because he knew, even in the play, he checks the phone to see if he's bugged by the FBI. And indeed, he was bugged by the FBI. He was hounded by the FBI. It has come to light that the FBI had a plan to harass him, to humiliate him, to embarrass him about his infidelities and just his speech, with the idea of driving him to suicide. Not a great moment in our life. So I thought the setting of the timing of the play was gorgeous, and this scene that pulls out in front of the stage at this gorgeous Geffen theater. They call it a matchbox stage. It's a self-contained motel room. Couldn't have been more clever. I have other thoughts, but what do you say?
Okay, I know I've already spoken. I'm going to give Nia a chance, but there was a couple of things that you said that I wanted to respond to. One is that on April the 3rd, 1968, that you were in the hospital. Now, you kind of blew over why you were in the hospital. He was in the hospital because he was wounded in Vietnam. And that's kind of important. I think that's germane to this topic, because a year before Martin Luther King gave this "I've been to the mountaintop" speech, he delivered a speech a year before at Riverside Church in New York City, where he talked about our role in Vietnam and how we should not be there. And just like Dick said, a lot of people say that his departure from just focusing on civil rights and looking at poor people, that may have led to his assassination. And then the other thing, the last statement in the "I've been to the mountaintop" speech, if you put that back to that speech. Okay. He says, I've been to the mountain. He says, "the coming of the Lord." Those were the last words, "the coming of the Lord." Those last 5 words. After he says "the coming of the Lord," it almost looks like he faints, because he falls back. You could see the stress. It was almost like he was about to collapse. He had so much stress on him that when he died and he was autopsied, they said that even though he was 39 years old, he had the heart of a 60-year-old man. And we occasionally talk about weathering. What does it mean to be Black in America? And what it means, and what it meant for Martin Luther King Jr. was that his heart was 20 years older than it should have been. If he wasn't killed by that assassin's bullet, he surely would not have lived a long life, just being the constant exposure to the injustices of being Black in America. So go ahead, Nia.
Well, on that note, I'm gonna turn back more to the actual production of the play. I do think, and I think we agree that I think it's valuable to see it if you're interested in seeing it. I think there's a lot of good content. What they were saying about, between, you could tell that the playwright pulled some of the things that my dad and Sharon were talking about with Martin Luther King giving his last speech, because it had that same sort of theme throughout the play. And again, don't want to give away too much. But the production value of this play is by far one of the best that we've ever seen. And it really allowed a lot of fun little moments to happen, and it allowed a lot of serious moments to happen. There was a wonderful montage towards end of the play that is probably one of the best that we've seen and most powerful. I think it's worth it. If you're considering seeing it, I think it's worth seeing at least once. I did not grow up in the 1960s. Maybe shocking to some. I learned about Martin Luther King just in school and things like that. And, um, we're taught that he was assassinated. We were taught what he fought for. But I don't think I've ever been shown any of his speeches. I've never seen for myself his oration and his ability to speak. And that was something I really enjoyed in the play. At the end and sort of throughout, the actor who plays Martin Luther King, who's the actor's name is eluding me right now, he did a great job, I think, of really sort of portraying those oratory skills and that confidence that he has. And I also really enjoyed seeing this because it was in a motel room, so he didn't have to have the normal uh, facade that I think he might put on, Martin Luther King himself might put on when he's out and about and giving his speeches. So it was really kind of an interesting viewpoint into sort of a more private aspect of his life, which I enjoyed. Do you guys have anything else you want to
Yeah,
say?
so the actor's name is John Michael Hill.
John Michael Hill, yes.
Maid Kamei's name is Amanda Warren. And in preparing for this, I saw that this play was originally put on in England, but then it had a run in New York City 10 years ago with Samuel L. Jackson playing Martin Luther King and Angela Bassett playing the maid. And there's something about I want to say something about the power dynamic. So Samuel L. Jackson is a large, imposing man. Doesn't look like a lot like Martin Luther King. He's much bigger. And Angela Bassett is somewhat more petite. In this play, the Amanda Warren, who plays Kamei to a T, she's wonderful. She's overpowering. She overpowers Martin Luther King, and sometimes he almost seems boyish. And what they said was the playwright had a hard time getting this play staged again. And I think because it does focus, the idea was to present Martin Luther King as a common man, a regular man with regular worries. He was worried about his marriage. He was worried about assassination. He was fatigued. His health was bad. He collapses. And it, only now and then, as Nia says, does he reprise some of his glorious moments as a speaker. I thought that I thought there was a sense that this was sort of a love story, kind of a romance, which I think was hard to take. I will say that the way it transforms, which we won't give away, was marvelous. I'm always most impressed by the acting. I thought both actors did a wonderful job. I think we all three thought they didn't quite connect. They didn't somehow connect. And the two of you had a comment that surprised me that maybe you want to talk about.
So Nia was the one that put forward that comment. I will say that I was questioning who was this play written for?
Mm-hmm.
And then Nia sort of had the same, and we both felt that way independently of each other. Neither one of us knew that that's what each of us was thinking, and until we left the theater, and it was like it just didn't it didn't feel like it rang true for me.
Yeah, same. Yeah, we shared that sentiment. It felt written for a particular audience. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it does create a different dynamic within the play. And we talked about and wondered about how it might be different if it was written for a different audience. We did notice that. We definitely did notice that. But touching again on what Dick said, there is sort of, and we talked about this too, there is sort of a feel of, is this going to be a romance? And, just knowing about Dr. King's extracurricular activities, it definitely had that sense to it. And I was a little concerned in the beginning because I was hoping that there would be more a more deeper, more meaningful discussion of MLK, his thoughts, his beliefs, you know, after giving this big speech. So it was a little concerning, but it transforms and takes you in a completely different direction by the end, and it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah,
A
so
lot of shared thoughts.
one other thought I had was that, you know, the production values, as Nia said, were out of sight. The stagecraft and some of the, you know, they even had I read in the program, they had a fight scene director. So they had a director directing that pillow fight. Marvelous stuff. But as I left it, you know, I thought, you know, I really miss the small theaters we seem to prefer. And now they couldn't have put all that production value in a play like with 50 people in the audience, but it would have been more dramatic to be up close and personal with the actors, like in Blue, with the one we saw at the Rogue Machine, with there was like 30 people around an interrogation room, or the Black theme play,
Difficult to
Heated
say.
discussion. A heated discussion.
which rang much truer
Phenomenal.
from the Blacks' perspective, I am told, than this play. I think that was part of it. It was written for an audience, and the audience was around her. Fortunately, you two and that other Black lady up in the front were there. It was West Siders who would pay that kind of money to a play.
You didn't mention their race. Wealthy West Siders, do they belong to a race?
Yes, they do. Which one is that?
Well, you know, the one that goes on unspoken most of the
But
time.
that was a part of the thing. I thought it was. I guess I went in there with the highest expectations, because, you know, I'm kind of the one that scouts out these plays because I do a lot of the Hollywood progressive work, and our friend Ed Rampell said it was the best play he'd seen in a long time. So I went there with high expectations, and I kind of left. Well, first of all, I could see that you two weren't skipping down the sidewalk. Fortunately, Nia took us to Johnny's Pastrami, which might have been the highlight of the day, down on Sepulveda.
Okay.
Yep.
So when we're not giving it our highest recommendation, but we think that it's worth seeing.
Yes, perfectly said. Perfectly said. The Mountaintop is playing at the Geffen through July 9th, with shows Tuesday through Friday at 8 p.m., shows on Saturdays at 3 p.m. and 8 p.m., and shows on Sundays at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. If you're curious, if you're interested, check it out. Let us know what you think. Any final comments? Final goodbyes?
Thank you for being the MC, Nia. Good job.
My pleasure.
So long, everyone.
Goodbye, folks.
Bye.